I didn't lose my temper when I saw it, and honestly, that's probably the only reason this story ends the way it does, because the first thing I noticed wasn't the balcony itself, it was the shadow stretching across my backyard like it had always belonged there, like it had a right to be there. And for a second, I just stood in the grass with my duffel bag still in my hand thinking maybe I was tired, maybe I was seeing it wrong. But no, that thing was real, and it wasn't supposed to be over my yard. I'd been gone just under a week, National Guard training upstate, nothing dramatic, just long days, bad coffee, and that constant hum of being away from your own life. And when you come back from that kind of routine, you expect things to feel the same. You expect your house to be where you left it, your street to look familiar, your little corner of the world untouched, but mine wasn't. I bought that house back in 2018, just outside a small town in Ohio, quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, the kind of place where people wave but don't ask too many questions, and the house itself was fine, 2 stories, older siding, creaky stairs, but the backyard, that's what sold me. Deep lot, old maple tree right in the center, branches wide enough to throw shade across half the yard in the summer, and fences on both sides that gave me something I didn't realize I needed until I had it. Privacy. It wasn't just space, it was separation, a buffer between me and everything else. And after a few years of moving around, deployments, temporary housing, shared walls, that backyard felt like mine in a way nothing else had in a long time. For the first couple years, nothing really changed. Same neighbors, same routines, weekends mowing the lawn, sometimes grilling, sometimes just sitting out there doing nothing, listening to the wind move through that tree. And then the house behind mine sold. The old place back there had been a mess for years, peeling paint, sagging roof, nobody really taking care of it. So when the for sale sign went up, I figured whatever came next would probably be an improvement, and in a way, it was just not the kind anyone asked for. A couple moved in, Ryan and Melissa Carter, mid-30s maybe, always looked put together in that kind of deliberate way, like they were already living in the house they planned to build, not the one they had. And within 2 months, the old place was gone, completely torn down, just a flat dirt lot and a sign with a rendering of what they called their forever home. White exterior, black trim, big windows, clean lines, modern farmhouse, the kind you see all over design blogs. And I remember standing at my kitchen window looking at that sign thinking, well, that's definitely going to change things. Construction started fast and didn't really stop, trucks showing up before sunrise, nail guns going off like clockwork at 7 a.m., dumpsters parked halfway into the street, sometimes blocking mailboxes, and contractors who seemed to treat the whole block like a shared workspace, parking wherever, cutting through yards, leaving materials stacked in places that weren't theirs, and I noticed it. Of course I did. But I kept telling myself it was temporary, that this is just how building goes, noisy, messy, inconvenient, but temporary. I'd run into Ryan a couple times during those months, usually when I was getting home from work or taking the trash out, and he always had that same easy smile, like everything was already smoothed over before it even became an issue. Sorry about the noise, he'd say, hands in his pockets, nodding toward the construction behind him. Won't be forever. And I'd nod back, yeah, I get it, because I did, at least on the surface. Melissa was different, quieter, more observant, the kind of person who notices where your eyes go when you're talking, and I caught her once looking past me, over my shoulder, into my backyard, not in a rude way, just measuring, like she was already imagining how their house would sit against mine. Still, nothing crossed the line, not yet. By the time the frame of their new house went up, it was clear it was going to be bigger than anything else on the block, 2 full stories, maybe even a partial third, and those big windows from the rendering. They weren't just for show, they were real, and they faced directly into my yard. I remember standing out there one evening, looking up at the skeleton of their house, trying to picture how it would feel once it was finished, and there was this small, quiet thought in the back of my mind, something like, this might change how private this place really is, but I pushed it aside. Because again, temporary, or at least manageable. By the time they were putting up siding, I had that trip scheduled, just a week away, and I figured when I came back, most of the heavy work would be done, things would settle. Maybe we'd all just adjust to the new normal, wave across the fence, keep to ourselves, that kind of quiet coexistence neighborhoods run on. The morning I left, the backyard still felt like mine, tree intact, sky open, nothing hanging over it, nothing casting a shadow that didn't belong. And if you'd told me that in 7 days, something would be built over my property without a word, without permission, I probably would have laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded too ridiculous to actually happen. But it did. And the thing about moments like that, they don't come with noise, they don't announce themselves, they just show up quietly, in the shape of something that shouldn't be there, and suddenly you're standing in your own yard, looking up at someone else's decision, realizing that while you were gone, someone made a choice that involved your space, and never once thought they needed to ask. And that's the part that stuck with me more than anything else. Not the wood, not the nails, not even the fact that it was physically over my property. It was the assumption, the quiet, confident assumption that they could take a piece of air above my land and turn it into something permanent, something usable, something they could step onto, like my backyard was just available. I set my bag down on the patio, walked a little closer to the fence, tilted my head to get a better angle. And that's when I saw it clearly. The edge of the balcony didn't stop at their fence line. It passed it, by a good couple of feet, hanging there like it had no idea where it was supposed to end. And underneath it, that's where things stopped being a misunderstanding and started becoming a problem. Because there were posts. Solid wooden support posts. And they weren't on their side. And once you see something like that, really see it, you can't unsee it. Those posts weren't close to the line. They weren't maybe over. They were planted, solid, deliberate, sitting a good couple feet inside my yard like they'd always belonged there, like somebody had measured it, approved it, and moved on. I remember actually stepping off the patio and walking straight toward them, like getting closer might somehow change what I was looking at, like maybe there'd be some explanation I missed from a distance. But no, up close it was worse, because I could see the fresh cuts on my maple tree, branches that had been there for years just gone, cleanly sliced off to make room for the structure above. That tree had outlasted storms, winters, everything, and now it was trimmed back for someone else's view. I stood there for a minute, hand on one of the posts, feeling the grain of the wood, still rough, still new. And there was this slow burn starting in my chest, not explosive, not loud, just steady, the kind that builds when something doesn't make sense but you know it's wrong anyway. So I did the simplest thing first. I walked next door. Ryan answered the door like nothing in the world was off. Same relaxed posture, same easy smile, like we were about to talk about the weather or a package that got delivered to the wrong address. "Hey man," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "What's up?" I didn't waste time. I just pointed over my shoulder. "Your balcony," I said. "It's over my yard." He blinked once, just once, like his brain needed a second to decide how serious I was being. And then he gave a small shrug, almost casual. "Yeah," he said, "it extends out a bit, but it's just airspace, right? Not like we're using your lawn." That sentence, that was the moment everything shifted for me, because it told me exactly how he saw it, not as a mistake, not as something to fix, but as something he'd already justified. "It's not just airspace," I said, keeping my voice even. "You've got support posts in my property, and you cut my tree to put it in." He glanced past me, toward the backyard, like he was checking the situation for the first time, even though I knew he wasn't. "The contractor handled all that," he said, a little quicker this time. "I'm sure it's within the lines." That phrase, I'd heard it before in different contexts, different situations, and it always meant the same thing. Nobody actually checked. "I have a survey," I told him. "From when I bought the house, the fence is on the line, and your posts are well inside it." For the first time, the smile faded just a little, not gone, just thinner. "Well," he said, straightening up a bit, "if there's an issue, we can look into it, but I really don't think it's a big deal." "Not a big deal." I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I didn't see a point in arguing on his porch, not yet. "Yeah," I said, "we'll look into it." And then I walked back to my yard. But this time I wasn't just looking at the balcony, I was mapping it, mentally drawing the lines I already knew were there, matching them against what shouldn't be. That night, I pulled out the folder where I kept all my house documents, closing papers, inspection reports, and the survey, clean, clear lines showing exactly where my property ended, where theirs began, no ambiguity, no gray area. I took it outside the next morning, lined it up with the fence, double-checked the measurements, even ran a tape from the post to the boundary just to be sure I wasn't missing something. I wasn't. It wasn't close. It wasn't accidental. It was obvious. So I started documenting everything, photos from multiple angles, close-ups of the posts, wide shots showing the overhang, the cut branches on the tree, even the shadows it cast at different times of day, because part of me already knew this wasn't going to be resolved with a friendly conversation and a handshake. A couple days later, I called the city building department. I didn't go in angry. I just laid it out, explained what I was seeing, what I had measured, and asked a simple question. Is this allowed? There was a pause on the other end, the kind where someone is already pretty sure they know the answer but wants to confirm before saying it out loud. Do you know if they pulled a permit for that structure? The woman asked. I don't, I said, but I can tell you it crosses the property line. All right, she replied. We'll send someone out to take a look. 3 days later, an inspector showed up, clipboard, vest, the whole routine, and I walked him through everything, showed him the survey, the measurements, the tree. He didn't say much while he was looking, just nodded here and there, took notes, stepped back to get a full view. Ryan came out halfway through, probably saw the city truck and figured it was better to be present than not. Hey, he said, a little tighter this time. What's going on? The inspector didn't even look up right away. We're just reviewing a potential encroachment, he said, calm, neutral. Ryan glanced at me, and there was something different in his expression now, not friendly, not casual, calculating. It's just a balcony, he said. It's not like it's on his land. The inspector finally looked up, then down at his notes, then back at the posts. These supports are on his land, he said plainly, tapping the clipboard, and the structure appears to extend beyond your setback line. There was a beat of silence after that, the kind where everyone knows the conversation just moved into a different category. Well, Ryan said, forcing a small laugh. If something's off, we can fix it, no problem. The inspector nodded. You'll receive a notice, he said. But for now, you need to stop using the balcony immediately. 2 days later, that notice showed up, bright orange, impossible to miss, posted right where anyone walking by could see it. Violation. Cease. Pending review. It's funny how quickly confidence can drain out of a situation when something official gets involved. The same structure that looked permanent a week ago suddenly looked temporary. That evening, Melissa came over. She didn't knock hard, just a couple light taps, like she wasn't sure how this was going to go. When I opened the door, she gave a small, careful smile. Hey, she said, can we talk for a minute? I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. Sure. She glanced toward the backyard, then back at me. Look, she said, I think this is getting a little bigger than it needs to be. I didn't say anything, just let her continue. It's a small encroachment, she went on, and it doesn't really affect how you use your yard. We were thinking maybe we could just work something out. Work what out? I asked. Well, she said, we could take care of the rest of the tree, clean it up, make it look nice, and obviously you'd still have full use of your space. It's just the air above it. There it was again. Air. Like it didn't belong to anyone. I'm not interested in sharing my backyard ceiling, I said. She hesitated, just for a second, then tried a different angle. This doesn't impact your property value, she said, a little more firmly now. If anything, having a nice structure next door could even. It impacts my privacy. I cut in, not raising my voice, just stating it. From that balcony, you can see straight into my bedroom. That landed. I could see it in her face, the way the argument shifted from abstract to personal. We wouldn't. I mean, we're not trying to. I know what you're trying to do, I said. You're trying to keep something you built without checking if you had the right to build it. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she sighed, a quiet, frustrated exhale. This is going to cost a lot to fix, she said. I nodded. Yeah, I replied. It probably is. She looked at me for another second, like she was deciding whether to push further or let it go, and then she just gave a small nod, turned, and walked back toward her house. And as I stood there watching her go, I realized something that made the whole situation clearer than anything else so far. This wasn't about misunderstanding, or miscommunication, or even negligence. This was a decision they made because they thought I wouldn't fight it. They looked at the layout, the cost of redesigning, the extra time it would take, and they weighed that against the likelihood of their neighbor pushing back, and they chose the cheaper option. They gambled on silence. And now, slowly, piece by piece, that bet was starting to fall apart. After that conversation, things went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet I used to have in that backyard, but the kind where everyone's waiting on something, where every small sound feels like it means more than it should, like the whole block knows something's off, but nobody's saying it out loud. For a few days, nothing changed physically. The balcony was still there, still hanging over my yard, still casting that same shadow every afternoon. But now it felt different, like it had an expiration date, like it was already halfway gone and just didn't know it yet. I kept going about my routine, work, errands, sitting out back in the evenings, but I found myself looking up more often than I used to, tracking the angle of the sun against that structure, noticing how easily someone could step out there and see everything. My patio, my kitchen window, even the corner of my bedroom if the blinds were open just a little too far. And every time I caught myself thinking about it, I'd come back to the same thing. They built this knowing exactly where it landed. About 2 weeks after the notice went up, I got a letter from the city, formal language, stamped header, the kind of document that doesn't leave much room for interpretation. They had reviewed the survey, confirmed the encroachment, and outlined the required correction, removed the portion of the structure that crossed the boundary, including any supports placed within my property. Clear, direct, non-negotiable. I didn't celebrate when I read it. It wasn't that kind of victory. It was more like a settling, like something that had been off balance finally tipping back into place. Not dramatic, just right. Across the fence, things were different. Ryan wasn't out as much anymore, at least not when I was. And when we did cross paths, it was brief, eye contact avoided, conversations reduced to a nod if that. The easy confidence he had before was gone, replaced with something tighter, more guarded. Melissa, on the other hand, tried once more. She caught me one afternoon while I was bringing in groceries, called my name before I could get inside. "Hey," she said, walking up a few steps, stopping just short of the porch, like there was an invisible line she didn't want to cross. "We got the letter." I set the bags down, leaned against the railing. "Yeah," I said. "I figured you would." She nodded, took a breath. "They're saying we have to remove it, or at least part of it. That's what it says." There was a pause. Then she looked at me, really looked this time, not measuring, not negotiating, just tired. "Is there any way you'd reconsider?" she asked, softer now. "Maybe some kind of easement, or, I don't know, something we could sign so it can stay?" And for a second, I actually thought about it. Not seriously, but enough to consider what that would mean. Permanently giving up that space above my yard, agreeing that what they did was acceptable as long as the paperwork caught up afterward, and the answer came just as quickly as the thought. "No," I said, not harsh, just final. She nodded slowly, like she expected it this time. "Okay," she said, almost to herself, and then after a second, I wish we'd handled it differently." "Yeah," I replied, "me too." She gave a small, resigned smile, then turned and walked back again, and that was the last real conversation we had. 32 days after that bright orange notice went up, the crew came back. Different group this time, or at least it felt that way. Less energy, less noise at first, like even they knew this wasn't a build, it was a reversal. They started early, just like before, but instead of nail guns and framing, it was drills running in reverse, metal clanking, wood shifting as pieces were loosened instead of secured. I was in the backyard when they began, coffee in hand, standing near the maple tree, what was left of it anyway. They took off the railing first, section by section, stacking it neatly to the side, then moved to the decking, pulling up boards one at a time, each one exposing the frame underneath, the structure slowly revealing how it had been put together and how it would come apart. There's something strangely satisfying about watching something like that, not because you enjoy someone else losing, but because you're seeing a wrong being undone in real time, piece by piece, with no shortcuts. By the second day, the balcony didn't look like a balcony anymore, just a skeleton of beams extending out from the house, and even that looked temporary now, like it had overstayed its welcome. Ryan was around that day, standing off to the side, talking to one of the workers, pointing occasionally, but not with the same authority he had during construction. This was different. This was compliance, not creation. At one point, he glanced over at me, just for a second, and I held the look, not aggressively, not challenging, just steady. He looked away first. On the third day, they got to the supports. Those posts that had been sitting in my yard like they belonged there, they didn't come out easily. The crew had to dig around the base, loosen the concrete, rock them back and forth until the ground gave way just enough to pull them free. And when the first one finally came out, there was this dull crack as the footing broke loose, followed by a heavy thud as it hit the ground. I don't know why, but that sound stuck with me. Maybe because it was the first real sign that the part that crossed the line was actually gone. They hauled the posts away by the end of the day, filled in the holes, smoothed the dirt over like they were erasing evidence of where they'd been. And just like that, the space under that balcony was open again. Not crowded, not claimed, just mine. A week later, they started rebuilding. This time, everything stayed on their side, smaller footprint, pulled back from the fence, and instead of facing straight into my yard, the new design angled off to the side, giving them a view, just not mine. It was quieter too, faster, like they were trying to finish it without drawing attention, without turning it into another statement. And when it was done, it looked fine. Honestly, it fit their house better, more balanced, like it belonged to them instead of reaching into something that didn't. We never talked about it again. No apology, no acknowledgement, just distance. And in a way, that was enough. Because my backyard, it felt like mine again, the way it did before all this started, the way it's supposed to feel when you step outside your own door and know exactly where your space begins and ends, not just on paper, but in practice. The maple tree's still there, a little thinner on one side, but holding on, kind of like the situation itself, not untouched, but still standing. And every now and then, I think about how easily it could have gone the other way, how simple it would have been to ignore it, to tell myself it wasn't worth the hassle, that it was just airspace, that maybe keeping the peace was more important than drawing a line. But lines exist for a reason, not just on surveys or property maps, but in how we treat each other, what we assume we're allowed to take, and what we're willing to defend when someone else decides those boundaries don't apply to them. So I'll leave you with this. If you came home one day and found something built over your property, not by accident, not by misunderstanding, but by choice, would you let it slide, or would you do something about it? Let me know what you think, because situations like this, they're never just about space. They're about where you decide your line really is.